What would you do if the person you loved betrayed you in the worst way imaginable? What if your best friend, the one you trusted above all others, was a part of it? And what if your own husband was in on it too? How far would you go to reclaim control of your life, to make them pay for the destruction they caused? This is the story of Sophie, Mark, Claire, and Eric, a tale of love, deception, and deadly revenge. The shocking consequences of Sophie's actions would forever alter the lives of everyone involved. This is a story of betrayal that spirals into violence, with repercussions no one saw coming. Welcome to Crime Time and Justice, your gateway to the dark and twisted world of crime, where we uncover the shocking tales of deception, betrayal, and justice. Sophia had been married to Eric for over 10 years, and in that time she thought she had learned everything there was to know about him. They had built a life together, a comfortable life, one that seemed unshakable. But lately something had felt off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but the signs were starting to add up. It wasn't just the late nights at the office or the sudden quietness when she asked him questions. There was something else, something she couldn't ignore. His behavior had changed subtly at first. His phone went everywhere with him, even to the bathroom. He started spending more time away from home under the guise of business meetings and last-minute work projects. He was distracted, distant, and seemed less engaged in their relationship. Sophia dismissed her suspicions. She had been busy too. Running her own business and taking care of their daughter meant she didn't always have the time to confront the growing unease she felt at home. She told herself she was being paranoid, overworked, stressed, imagining things. But the nagging feeling wouldn't go away. Then came the phone call. It wasn't the call she was expecting. It was from Mark, Claire's husband. He was angry, frantic, and full of accusations. His words hit her like a slap, each one more damning than the last. "Your husband has been seeing my wife for months," Mark said, his voice shaky. "I don't know what to do with this information, but I thought you should know." Sophia's mind went blank. She wasn't prepared for this. She had suspected an affair, but hearing it confirmed felt like a punch to the gut. She thought she'd be angry, but instead she felt eerily calm. Her fingers gripped the phone so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Mark kept talking, detailing Claire's confession, but Sophia's mind was already working in overdrive. Her gut had been right. All those late nights, the unexplained absences, the way Eric had started distancing himself from her, it was all part of the same story. It wasn't just her imagination. She didn't say a word as Mark continued, detailing his plans to confront Eric. She hung up the phone slowly, her pulse quickening. She didn't have time for shock, for tears. She needed to think. Sophia had always prided herself on being methodical, strategic in every decision she made. And now she would need to be more calculated than ever. She wasn't just hurt by Eric's betrayal. She was angry, yes, but she was also coldly focused. She had one goal now: to make Eric pay. Sophia didn't cry. She didn't scream. She simply stood there, staring at the phone in her hand, a plan already forming in her mind. This wasn't just about infidelity. It was about control. Eric had betrayed her, but now she was in charge of what came next. Sophia knew she couldn't act on impulse. She needed to be strategic. Every step had to be calculated. Eric's betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a business deal gone wrong, and that was something she could turn to her advantage. She started by gathering information. She made a mental list of everything she knew about Claire and her husband Mark, their financial troubles, the recent legal issues Claire had mentioned during their last dinner party, and the quiet tension that always seemed to hang around their marriage. Claire had confided in her about her mounting debt and how Mark had tried to hide the severity of their situation. Sophia wasn't sure where it all fit, but she knew it was leverage. If Claire was involved in a money laundering scheme with Eric, it wasn't just an affair, it was a crime. And crimes could be exposed. Crimes could destroy everything. Sophia spent the next few days gathering documents and digging deeper into Claire and Eric's communications. She hacked into Eric's email, something she had never done before. She found a series of emails between him and Claire that were carefully worded, but the tone was unmistakable. They were partners in something much bigger than an affair. They were involved in something illegal, something that could ruin both of them. Sophia's mind raced as she connected the dots. The emails didn't just discuss their personal relationship. They talked about money, transactions, and clients who preferred to remain anonymous. They were laundering money, and they'd been doing it for months. Claire and Eric had been working together to cover their tracks, using their respective businesses as fronts. And with that knowledge, Sophia knew exactly what she had to do. She reached out to Mark under the guise of sympathy. She pretended to be the concerned wife who had just learned of Eric's betrayal. She told him she had suspected something was off for months, that she had seen the signs but hadn't been able to put it together until now. Mark, in his fury and heartbreak, was eager to take action. Sophia made sure she didn't overplay her hand. She let him vent, let him express his anger, all while feeding him bits of information, just enough to make him believe she was on his side. She mentioned things she had discovered, like the strange bank transfers and the overseas accounts Eric had been using for months. She knew it was only a matter of time before Mark would make the decision to confront Claire and Eric. But Sophia wasn't finished. She planted the seed of an even more dangerous idea in Mark's head. She told him that the affair wasn't the only thing he needed to confront. She hinted that Eric and Claire might be involved in something far more serious. She suggested that with the right connections they could expose the money laundering scheme. It was a crime that could send both of them to prison. Sophia had a plan, and she was executing it perfectly. The investigation that followed was swift, but the consequences were far more far-reaching than Sophia had anticipated. Eric and Claire were arrested and held without bail. Their business accounts were frozen, and all their assets seized. For the first time, they were truly vulnerable, exposed to the full weight of their actions. Sophia's plan was working, but the weight of it was starting to settle in. As the weeks passed, the media began covering the arrests. Headlines flashed across the screen. Business partners arrested in multi-million-dollar money laundering scheme. The world had finally learned of the secret they'd kept hidden for so long. Sophia watched from a distance, closely monitoring every news broadcast, but a part of her couldn't shake the feeling of unease. Mark was the first to crack. The man who had always been in control, the one who made deals with a smile, was now cornered. Sophia knew Mark better than anyone, and she could see how the weight of his situation was wearing him down. This wasn't just about money or status anymore. This time he was fighting for his freedom. The phone calls came, but Sophia didn't answer. She knew Mark would reach out, pleading for help, for her to save him from the mess he'd made. But this wasn't a time for second chances, not after everything he had done to her. Claire, too, was struggling under the pressure. Her usual self-assurance had evaporated, replaced by a woman rapidly realizing the depth of her mistake. Facing criminal charges, Claire's life was unraveling fast. And for what? For a man who had betrayed her just as thoroughly as he had betrayed his wife. In the days following their arrests, Sophia kept her distance. She let the situation unfold without interference. Mark's lawyers worked tirelessly. Claire hired the best legal team money could buy. They made their case, begged for leniency, and tried to salvage what little dignity they had left. But it was clear. Nothing was going to save them now. Sophia kept a close watch on the case, knowing that every legal move brought them one step closer to the inevitable. The evidence was overwhelming. There were paper trails, transactions, and email threads that tied them directly to the illegal activities. Mark's financial empire had crumbled. Claire's name was tarnished beyond repair. But then something unexpected happened. A week later, Sophia received an anonymous tip. A cryptic message, no signature, no trace of its origin. The details were startling. Claire's psychological state in the wake of the arrests. The message hinted that Claire might be planning something drastic. Sophia dismissed it at first, but as the days wore on, the sense of foreboding grew stronger. She couldn't ignore it. She began to wonder if it was a warning. Sophia's attention shifted to Claire. She had watched Claire's rise to success with envy, and now she was watching her downfall with a strange sense of detachment. The betrayal, the revenge, everything had led to this moment. But now something inside her flickered. A nagging thought. Claire was unraveling, and Sophia wasn't sure if she could stand by and watch anymore. The news came a week later. Claire had taken her own life. The shock rippled through the media first, and Sophia felt her phone buzz with messages, people reaching out to her, asking if she was okay. They had been friends for years. Of course, they were shocked. Sophia felt something she wasn't expecting. Guilt. A deep, consuming guilt. She couldn't just pretend anymore. She couldn't keep the truth locked inside. The next evening, she found herself sitting in a dimly lit restaurant with Claire's husband, Mark. He hadn't said much since the news of his wife's death, but tonight he was different, more frantic, raw, and consumed by grief. He kept asking how this had happened, how everything had gone so wrong. Sophia stared at her wine glass, feeling the weight of the words she was about to speak. "I need to tell you something," she began, her voice barely a whisper. Mark looked at her, desperate for answers. "What do you mean? What's going on, Sophia?" Sophia's breath caught in her throat. This was it. She had kept the secret for so long, but now she couldn't keep it inside anymore. "I'm the one who set it all up. I orchestrated everything. The money laundering, the arrests. I wanted revenge on Eric and Claire. And now..." Her voice faltered. "Now she's dead." Mark's face twisted with disbelief, then rage. He stood up, knocking his chair back violently. You did this? You ruined everything." Sophia recoiled as Mark's fury filled the room. His chest heaved, his fists clenched tight. "You destroyed my wife's life, and now she's gone? You did this to her?" Sophia tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. The gravity of the moment crashed down on her. "You're going to pay for this," Mark hissed. "I'll go to the police. I'll tell them everything. They'll know it was you. You'll rot in prison for the rest of your life." Sophia's heart raced. The walls were closing in. She had made one fatal mistake, telling him. Now there was no turning back. Her mind raced. She thought of her family, her career, the life she had worked so hard to build. If Mark went to the police, everything would be destroyed. And so, in that moment, with no other choice, she made a decision. The next day, Sophia drove to Mark's house, her mind racing with the only thought that could bring her some semblance of peace, to make him understand, to somehow convince him that she never meant for Claire to die. She parked outside his house and took a deep breath. When Mark answered the door, his face was a mask of anger and grief. "I can't believe you're here," he said through gritted teeth. "You've destroyed everything. Claire is gone and you want to talk?" Sophia opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. She needed to make him understand. "Mark, please. You don't understand. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Going to the police won't bring her back. It won't fix anything. We're both victims here. You've lost your wife, but I've lost my best friend." Mark shook his head, his sorrow morphing into rage. "You may have been cheated on, Sophia, but I've lost my wife forever, and I'm going to make sure you suffer for this." With those words, he turned away and coldly ordered her to leave. "Get out. I don't want to see you again." Sophia's heart pounded. She felt a suffocating panic rise in her chest as she slowly turned and walked back to her car. She wasn't ready to lose everything, not yet, not after everything she had done to cover her tracks. Sitting in her car, she was paralyzed by panic. Her mind raced with thoughts, each more frantic than the last. She had to fix this. She had to stop Mark from going to the police. She couldn't let everything she had carefully orchestrated unravel now. Minutes later, she saw Mark. He was walking his dog down the street, the same street she had just parked on. Panic surged. Her hands trembled as she started the car. She didn't think. She acted. Without thinking, Sophia slammed her foot on the accelerator. The car's headlights flashed brightly as she sped toward Mark, who turned around just in time to see the vehicle coming straight at him. He tried to step back, but it was too late. The car hit him at full speed. The impact was immediate. Mark was thrown to the ground, and Sophia didn't stop. She didn't even glance back. Her heart pounded, but her mind was numb, blank with panic. Sophia couldn't believe what she had just done. She had killed Mark, just like that. The man who had been her husband's closest friend. The man who had just lost his wife. And now she had taken his life too. For a moment she thought it was over. She thought she had gotten away with it. But what Sophia didn't realize was that the investigation into Mark's death had only just begun. At first, the police labeled it a hit and run, a tragic accident. But it wasn't that simple. Weeks later, the case took an unexpected turn. The investigators received a crucial lead: prison phone calls from Mark. In the calls, he had reached out to Eric, Sophia's husband. Mark had told Eric everything. He revealed Sophia's confession about the money laundering scheme and how she had set up both him and Claire. He had planned to go to the police to expose her. Now the investigators had the motive they needed. The phone calls, the confession, the panic. It all pointed to Sophia. Sophia wasn't prepared for the knock on her door. The police had come for her. They wanted to question her about Mark's death. At first, she denied everything. She acted surprised, confused. She told them she had no idea what had happened to Mark. But the pressure mounted quickly. The detectives confronted her with the evidence, the prison phone calls, Mark's plan to go to the police, and the pieces of the puzzle that had fallen into place. The walls closed in. Sophia's resolve began to crack. She couldn't keep up the lie anymore. Under the weight of the interrogation, she broke. The truth spilled out. She confessed to everything: the money laundering, Claire's death, and now Mark's murder. Sophia was arrested, charged with murder and conspiracy. There was no escaping it now. It was over. Sophia's confession sealed her fate. The evidence against her was overwhelming: Mark's phone calls, the hit and run, and her own admission of guilt. Despite her remorse and attempts to explain her actions, there was no escaping the truth. The courts moved quickly, and soon Sophia was facing charges not only for Mark's murder, but also for orchestrating the events that led to Claire's death and the money laundering scheme. Her trial became a media spectacle. The public quickly turned on her. The betrayal of a friend, the manipulation of her husband, and the chilling coldness of her actions left little room for sympathy. The prosecution painted a portrait of a woman consumed by jealousy, guilt, and a desire for control. They argued that Sophia had meticulously set up Claire and Mark to punish them for their infidelity, using the money laundering scheme to frame them both and secure her own advantage. Sophia's defense team tried to plead her case, suggesting her actions had been driven by emotional instability and desperation. They argued that she never meant for anyone to die, that the murder of Mark was an impulsive act of panic, not premeditation. But the jury was unconvinced. In the end, the evidence spoke for itself. Sophia was convicted of first-degree murder in Mark's death, as well as conspiracy and fraud in connection with the money laundering operation. The court found that she had deliberately orchestrated everything, setting up her husband and Claire with full knowledge of the consequences. When the judge read her sentence, life in prison without the possibility of parole, Sophia's face remained stoic, but the weight of her decision seemed to finally hit her. She had gone from a woman desperately trying to control her life to one who had destroyed everything: her family, her friends, her future. After the trial, Sophia was transferred to a high-security prison. The life she had known was now a distant memory. She had betrayed those closest to her, and in doing so, she had lost everything. Her marriage to Eric was officially over. He had divorced her during the trial, unable to look past the devastation she had caused. Life behind bars was a harsh reality. The media's portrayal of her as a cold-hearted, manipulative criminal followed her into the prison, and it didn't take long for the other inmates to learn who she was. Sophia's reputation preceded her, and she quickly became a target for both physical and emotional abuse. Despite the years ahead of her, Sophia could not escape the consequences of her actions. The guilt, which had once driven her to confess, now haunted her every day in prison. She was trapped in a prison of her own making, physically, emotionally, and mentally. While she had been convicted of murder, the true toll of her betrayal could never be fully understood. She had sacrificed her family, her friendships, and her future to cover up a crime that spiraled out of control. And now, as she spent her days in a cell, the reality of what she had lost, the people she had loved, the life she had built, became the ultimate punishment. As the months turned into years, Sophia's thoughts often drifted back to the night she killed Mark. It had been an act of desperation, one that seemed to have no logical explanation at the time. But looking back, she realized it was the culmination of every mistake she had made, every lie she had told, and every action she had taken to cover up her own guilt. Claire's death, the betrayal of her husband, the manipulation of both Mark and Eric. Each of these decisions had seemed small at the time, but together, they had created an unbreakable chain of events that led to Mark's murder and Sophia's ultimate downfall. In the cold, sterile environment of prison, Sophia's mind replayed those moments over and over. She thought about Claire's life stolen too soon. She thought about Mark, whose life she had taken in a moment of panic. And she thought about Eric, who had trusted her, loved her, and stood by her until the truth had come crashing down. But now there was no turning back. Sophia had created a path of destruction, and it was too late to undo the damage. She had learned the hard way that betrayal, once it begins, can never be fully erased. And in the end, it wasn't just the lives of others she had ruined, it was her own. Sophia's life sentence was more than just the result of her crime. It was the manifestation of everything she had tried to hide. She would never be free again. The friends, the family, the life she had once known, it was all gone. Her story became one of caution, a warning about the price of betrayal and manipulation. Those who had once trusted her now saw her for what she truly was, a woman willing to destroy everyone she loved to protect herself. And in the end, it wasn't just the people she had hurt who paid the price. It was herself. Sophia's name became synonymous with the ultimate betrayal, the one act of selfishness that led to the loss of everything. It was a life sentence that stretched far beyond the walls of her prison, a constant reminder that no matter how hard she tried to erase the past, it would always find its way back to her. The case of Sophia Wexler and the tragedy that unfolded serves as a chilling reminder of the destructive power of deceit, manipulation, and jealousy. It's a story that raises difficult questions about the lengths people will go to in order to protect themselves, even when it means sacrificing those closest to them. In the end, Sophia's story is a tragic one, marked by a series of irreversible decisions. The betrayals, the lies, the murders, each step brought her closer to the life she now leads behind bars. While the justice system has done its part, the true cost of her actions will forever be felt by the people she hurt, the families torn apart, and the life she destroyed. Thanks for watching Crime Time and Justice.